Welcome, sleepy one. I'll be your storyteller tonight. Before we begin, please like and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And now, close your eyes. Let's begin. Long before that winter of 2007, before the snow packed down like concrete and the wind sliced through every layer you owned, Lucas and I were inseparable. We'd met in second grade, side by side in Mrs. Whitaker's class. He was the kid with skinned knees and a grin that dared the world to test him. I was quieter, the one reminding him to grab his backpack before the bell or to duck when he hurled rocks at hornets' nests. Somehow we balanced each other out. He brought the chaos. I brought the breaks. By 17, we were more like brothers than friends. My parents liked him, but always worried about how far he'd go to push a line. His parents liked me because I kept him from crossing it. If Lucas was the spark, I was the damp towel he couldn't quite shake off. That fall broke something in him. Mariah, his girlfriend of almost 2 years, called it quits after too many parking lot screaming matches. She accused him of lying, sneaking out, drinking too much. I never knew what was real, but I'd seen him that night, slamming his fists into the steering wheel hard enough to leave bruises. He didn't cry, not in front of me, but something in his eyes changed, like a light gone dim. We had a ritual, late-night drives. No plan, no curfew, just miles of road rolling under the tires. Duluth was all hills and sharp turns that spilled down toward Lake Superior, where the water at night looked like an endless sheet of black glass. Street lamps hummed over frozen sidewalks, and out on the county roads the world narrowed to the reach of your headlights. Driving was how we escaped, how we pretended our lives were bigger than that small-town silence. The night everything changed started like all the others. A Friday, bitterly cold. The kind of night that made your breath freeze before it left your mouth. I was half asleep over a history textbook when the crunch of tires outside pulled me to the window. Lucas's old Suburban idled at the curb, headlights casting gold on the snowdrifts. He didn't need to call. He never did. When I climbed in, the heater rattling against the cold, I knew something was off. His jaw was tight, his knuckles pale around the wheel. No smirk, no ready to waste some gas? Just a flat, let's drive. I can't stay in my head right now. We rode in silence for the first half hour, music blasting loud enough to blur our thoughts. Outside, snow flurried past the windshield. Houses glowed with early Christmas lights, though it was still weeks till December. But the longer we drove, the weirder his energy got. His laugh turned sharp, almost forced. His words came clipped, brittle. There was a look in his eyes that wasn't heartbreak. It was something darker. By 3 a.m., I realized we'd been looping the same back roads. When we passed that rusted old gas station again, I tried to lighten it. Guess the universe wants us to stop for snacks. He didn't even blink. His grip on the wheel tightened. Then, barely above a whisper, he said it. Snow covers everything. Bodies too. The words didn't hit all at once. They crawled in, cold and wrong. I turned to him, waiting for the usual grin, the gotcha smirk. But he didn't even glance at me. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. Finally free. The heater hummed, the tires hissed on ice, and I stared at the boy beside me, trying to find the friend I knew somewhere behind that blank look. I told myself it was nothing. Just the kind of late-night, half-delirious crap people say when they're tired and hurting. But then he said, clear as day, I buried her where no one will ever find her. And you helped me. For a second, I didn't even process it. Then my stomach dropped. What the hell are you talking about? I demanded. He smiled. Not big, just enough to twist my gut. He didn't answer. Just flicked the turn signal and took us down a narrow road lined with trees heavy under snow. Their branches bent low, skeletal, as if leaning in. I don't know what you're talking about, Lucas, I said, my voice shaking. Don't screw around like that. He glanced at me, eyes glassy. You don't remember? His tone was soft, almost pitying. Then he nodded at my hands. Look at your nails. I looked down. Dirt was packed beneath them, wet, dark, clumped like it came from deep underground. My breath stuttered. I hadn't touched the ground all night. I hadn't even left the car. What is this? I whispered. You helped me, he said. His voice was steady now, calm in a way that made my skin crawl. You wanted to. You just don't want to remember. I scraped at my palms, trying to wipe the dirt away, but it wouldn't come off. Panic burned through me. I replayed the night in my head. The drive. The music. the looping roads. But then there were flashes, gaps I hadn't noticed before, laughter that didn't sound like mine, the feel of freezing air cutting my lungs, the weight of something heavy pressing on my shoulders. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, that's not real." Lucas pulled over and cut the engine. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Snow drifted around us, the flakes catching in the headlights before melting into the dark. He turned to me, eyes lit with something feverish. "You remember more than you want to, don't you?" I shook my head again, but the images kept flickering. A shovel, moonlight glinting on metal, my boots sinking into soft earth. And there, Mariah's red scarf, the one with the little white stars half buried in the snow. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Was he trying to plant this in my mind? Or was I uncovering something I'd buried deep enough to forget? "Stop," I whispered. "Please, just stop. Tell me you're messing with me." He leaned closer, his breath fogging between us in the freezing air. "Snow covers everything," he murmured, voice steady, almost reverent. "But not forever." After that, time seemed to dissolve. The hours blurred into a sleepless haze of silence and dread. We drove without direction, the Suburban's engine humming low, headlights carving tunnels through the snow. Lucas's eyes stayed fixed on the road, but I could feel his thoughts darting, toward my dirt-stained nails, toward the empty fields flashing by, toward the shadows stretching long across the snow. At one point, I reached for the radio, just to hear something, a song, a voice, anything. He slapped my hand away, sharp and sudden. "No distractions," he said, eyes never leaving the road. I sat rigid, staring out the window, my mind spinning. If he was telling the truth, if we really had buried someone, why couldn't I remember? And if he was lying, why was there dirt under my nails? By 5 a.m., a faint ribbon of pink cut across the horizon. Lucas finally pulled over beside the frozen lip of Lake Superior. The lake stretched endlessly, a mirror of black glass fractured by ice. He shut off the engine. The silence roared so loud I could hear my own pulse. "Tell me what you see," he said. I blinked. "The lake." He shook his head. "No, tell me what you remember." "I don't," I said quietly. "You do." His hand shot out, clamping around my wrist. His grip was like iron. "Say it! Let go!" I tried to pull back, but his fingers dug in deeper. My throat tightened. Then, like a film reel skipping to life, images hit me in bursts, mud sticking to my gloves, my heartbeat hammering, Lucas's voice shouting, "Dig faster!" And a scream, short, sharp, cut off mid-breath. I wrenched my arm free, threw the door open, and stumbled out into the cold. The air slapped me hard, burning my lungs, but it didn't chase away the panic. I bent over, gasping, staring at my hands. The dirt was still there, still real, and God help me, it matched the memory. Lucas leaned against the hood, exhaling a white plume. His tone was quiet now, almost smug. "See? You're not as innocent as you think." "No," I snapped. "I'd never." He didn't blink. "You already did." The sunrise painted his face gold, but it didn't warm him. His eyes looked hollow, bottomless pits that refused to reflect the light. I thought about running, but the snow was knee-deep on either side of the road and we were miles from town. He had the keys. He was stronger. So I stood there trembling, caught between believing he was confessing to murder or dragging me down into his delusion. The sky turned from pink to blinding white. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For one breath, I thought of calling the police, just blurting everything, begging for help. But what would I say? My best friend claims we buried his ex-girlfriend, and now I don't know what's real. They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd find proof. Lucas's gaze flicked to my pocket. "Don't even think about it," he said softly, like a teacher scolding a child. "Nobody would believe you." My voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" He tilted his head. "Because lies rot you from the inside. You need to face the truth." "What truth?" I shouted. "That you've lost your mind? That you're trying to drag me into it?" For the first time, his expression broke. His jaw trembled. His eyes glistened. "You think this is just me?" he whispered. "You think I could carry this alone?" Something in his voice, raw, aching, made my stomach turn. Doubt clawed its way back in. What if he wasn't lying? What if I had helped? What if there'd been a night, soaked in adrenaline and rage, where I'd crossed a line so terrible, My mind refused to keep it. But then I remembered Mariah's face at school just 2 days before. Angry, alive, slamming her locker door. Unless memory was slipping again, unless time itself was twisting. I backed away, step by step, until the soles of my boots hit the frozen edge of the lake. The ice groaned beneath me. I didn't do anything, I whispered. I didn't. Lucas smiled faintly, but it wasn't cruel anymore. Just tired. Keep telling yourself that. We drove back in silence. The roads wound endlessly, and the Suburban's engine growled low, like it was straining under the weight of what had just passed between us. I stared out the window at the drifting snow, each flake blurring into the next, wondering if I'd ever know what was true. When we finally pulled into my driveway, the sky was bright and colorless. My neighborhood looked normal, sleepy, safe. My mom's car was parked out front, frost sparkling on the windshield. For a second, I wanted to believe none of it had happened. But as I opened the door, Lucas caught my wrist one last time. His grip was light this time, almost tender. "Snow doesn't keep secrets forever," he said softly. Then he let go. I stumbled inside, my heart battering against my ribs. I went straight to the sink, scrubbing my hands raw under hot water. The dirt wouldn't come off. After that, I stopped answering his calls. At school, we barely spoke, though. I could still feel his eyes on me from across the room, steady, searching. Mariah vanished the next week. Some said she'd gone to Wisconsin to live with her aunt. Others said she'd dropped out. No one really knew. And neither did I. Sometimes I dream about it. Shovels breaking frozen ground, laughter that isn't mine, a scream swallowed by the wind. Other nights I wake convinced Lucas planted it all. Lies, dirt, guilt, just to twist me into his spiral. But either way, every winter when the snow piles high and the nights stretch long, I hear his voice again. You remember more than you want to, don't you? And I still don't know how to answer. Because evil doesn't always come from strangers or monsters. It seeps from people we love, people we trust, until you can't tell where their darkness ends and yours begins. Maybe the worst horror isn't what someone does to you. It's what they convince you you've done yourself. I'd always been the kind of kid who chased the thrill. In Ravenwood, Oregon, there wasn't much else to do. The town was small, sleepy, and always wrapped in mist that made it hard to tell where the real ended and imagination began. My best friend Clive and I thrived on boredom and bad ideas. We spent endless afternoons leaping off docks into freezing water, sneaking into old lumber mills, daring each other to push just a little further each time. If someone told us don't, it sounded like a challenge. By spring of 2011, we were 17, too young to know better, too old to be scared of anything. Everyone else was tangled in sports, homework, or part-time jobs. But Clive and I wanted something that made us feel alive again. That's when the Hawthorne estate caught our attention. The mansion sat at the forest's edge like a rotting crown. Its rusted iron gates dangled from one hinge, vines crawling up the cracked stone walls. People in town still whispered about the Hawthornes, a rich family that had vanished decades ago. Some said Old Man Hawthorne went mad. Others said he disappeared into the woods and never came back. No one had seen a light in that house for as long as anyone could remember. Naturally, that made it irresistible. We spent a week hyping ourselves up. I won't lie. Half the thrill was just testing ourselves, seeing if we could walk into something that scared everyone else. Clive liked the rush but always wanted a safety net. Me, I didn't believe in those. "You're actually doing this tonight?" Clive asked as we sat in my old Honda a few blocks away, the windshield fogged with our breath. Outside, the air smelled like wet pine and chimney smoke. "I'm not letting you chicken out now," I said, grinning. "It's just a house, man. Old dusty, probably full of rats and broken crap. That's it." He flipped his flashlight in his hands, trying to play it cool. "Yeah, rats and dust. Perfect Saturday night activity." By 11:45, we were standing at the gates. When I pushed, the metal shrieked like something alive dragging against stone. The sound echoed through the still night. As we walked up the overgrown path, every step cracked branches beneath our boots, each one sounding like footsteps that didn't belong to us. My flashlight cut across the mansion's facade, warped shutters, blistered paint, and black windows staring back like empty sockets. My pulse thudded hard, part fear, part excitement. Inside, the air was thick, damp, decaying wood, a hint of metal, maybe blood, maybe rust. Our footsteps echoed off marble floors buried in dust. The chandelier above us swayed slightly, its crystals clicking in the draft. Cobwebs clung to our sleeves as we moved deeper in. I ran my hand over the railing of the grand staircase. Flakes of white paint came off like old skin. Clive's whisper broke the silence. "This place is massive." "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding strange in the hollow room. "Empty too," just like they said. We crept through the hallways, opening doors to rooms full of broken furniture, yellowed wallpaper, stacks of old newspapers. That's when we heard it, a whisper, so faint at first, curling through the air like smoke. We both froze, heads turning at the same time. "Another, did you hear that?" Clive murmured. I nodded slowly, my stomach tightening. The sound came again, louder this time, more deliberate. Words taking shape inside the static of the house. "Don't leave." It didn't hit like a scream would. It crept in quietly, a chill that crawled from the back of my neck down my spine. I tried to reason with myself. Houses make sounds. Air moves. Floors settle. I even said it out loud, more for me than him. "It's just the wind." "Gotta be." Clive's flashlight jittered across the walls. "No," he said, shaking his head. "That wasn't wind. Someone said something. I heard it." His voice cracked near the end. I forced a laugh that didn't sound like me. "Come on, let's check the library. Probably some busted vent or—" Before I could finish, a cold draft swept down the hall, wrapping around us. The whispers came again, closer, weaving between the gusts. Clive stopped mid-step, eyes unfocused. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't catch. "Clive?" I stepped up beside him, laying a hand on his shoulder. His skin was clammy. I squeezed gently. "Hey man, you good?" He blinked hard, then shook his head like shaking off a bad dream. "It's nothing," he mumbled, but his voice was hollow, thin. I met his eyes, and for the first time since we were kids jumping off docks, I saw real fear there. The kind that doesn't go away when the adrenaline does. We tried the front door. It wouldn't move, not stuck, but sealed like the house itself refused to let us go. Panic rose fast, clawing up my chest. "What the hell?" I muttered, slamming my shoulder against the wood. It shuddered but didn't give. The wind outside howled through the cracks and the hinges groaned like something alive holding tight. Clive's grip tightened around my arm. "There, did you see that?" I turned toward where he pointed. At the far end of the hall, the shadows bent in ways they shouldn't. For a second, I thought my light was flickering, but no, it was moving. Someone was gliding toward us, slow and soundless, shape-shifting with the darkness. "We're leaving." "Now," I hissed. Clive didn't argue. We bolted down the side corridor, shoving through debris and half-rotten doors until one finally burst open. The cold night air hit us like a slap. Outside, everything felt wrong. Too thick, too sharp, as if the atmosphere itself didn't want us breathing it. Clive leaned against the gate, gasping. I don't remember what happened in there," he said between ragged breaths. I couldn't answer. The memory was already splintering into fragments. The whispers wrapping around my ears, that crawling sensation on my neck like unseen hands tracing my skin. Even now, decades later, I can still feel how alive that house was. Aware. Hungry. The next morning, fear gave way to something worse. Curiosity. I needed to understand. Clive wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't even meet my eyes, but I couldn't let it go. I spent hours combing through what little the library held about the Hawthorne estate. The records were thin. The family had vanished in 1949. No sale, no obituary, no explanation. People filled the silence with folklore, curses, rituals, missing travelers. "I don't care what anyone says," I told Clive one afternoon at the diner, trying to sound casual while my heart raced. "There's a logical explanation. Houses make noise. Light plays tricks. People exaggerate." Clive didn't even touch his food. He looked up, face pale, voice flat. "You don't get it, man. That house doesn't make noise, it listens. It wants you there. It knows when you're afraid." I forced a laugh, but it came out strained. You sound like one of those ghost tour guys. He didn't laugh back. Later that week, we drove past the estate again. The fog clung low and the gates moaned in the wind. I told myself not to look, but I did, and in one of the cracked upper windows something moved. A slow, deliberate shift like someone pulling back from view. My chest tightened. For the first time, I considered letting it all go. But curiosity doesn't let go easily. Over the next few months, I dug deeper. Archives, old newspapers, whispered interviews with townsfolk who remembered things they'd rather forget. There were rumors of a fortune hidden somewhere inside, a sealed safe, legal documents that vanished with the family, and always at the edge of the stories, mention of a caretaker who'd gone missing a year before the Hawthorns disappeared. No body, no trace. By late summer, my obsession had turned into resolve. I needed answers. We go back, I told Clive one night, spreading old blueprints across my kitchen table. He just stared. You're serious? After what we saw? I'm not going in blind this time, I said. We'll be prepared, cameras, gloves, ropes. We'll figure out what's really there. He looked away, jaw clenched. You're out of your damn mind. But he still showed up. We reached the mansion just after midnight. The forest around it was wet and quiet, every sound swallowed by mist. The house stood waiting, darker than before, almost harsh. Inside, the air was thick with decay. Every breath tasted of mold and something metallic. We moved carefully, boots crunching over plaster. The whispers started before we reached the staircase. Softer this time, persistent like a lullaby sung through walls. Clive froze. You hear it again? I nodded. Keep moving. He didn't. It's saying something. Don't listen, I said. But even as I said it, I did. We reached the library, shelves half collapsed, books swollen from damp. One diary lay open on a warped desk, its pages smeared but legible enough. It belonged to the youngest Hawthorne child. Most entries were mundane, school lessons, piano practice until the last few weeks. They whisper to me at night. They sound like us. They want us to stay. The final line was a shaky scrawl. They are coming. I can't leave. That was when the whispers swelled, circling us like a tide. I realized then this wasn't about ghosts. It wasn't about some trapped soul or curse. The house itself was alive, fed by fear, by fascination. It grew stronger the more we wanted to understand it. Clive's flashlight flickered. We need to go, he breathed. I didn't argue this time. We ran, following the familiar creaks and cracks until the door finally gave. When we burst into the cold air, it was like breaking through water after drowning. We didn't speak on the drive back. Didn't even turn on the radio. There was nothing to say. We never returned after that. The cameras stayed in storage. The film untouched. The mansion still stands, sagging deeper into the woods each year. No one lives there, no one dares. Ravenwood remains as it's always been. Quiet, fog-bound, pretending to forget. Sometimes when I walk near those woods, I swear I can hear it again. The faint, familiar whisper weaving through the wind. Don't leave. And I've learned to listen, not to answer. Not to go back, but to remember that curiosity, no matter how thrilling, can open doors that were never meant for us. Some boundaries aren't there to keep things out. They're there to keep them in. It was the summer of 1999 in Portsmouth, Maine, and the night smelled like salt, gasoline, and that faint fishy tang from the harbor that always clung to the air. I was 15, reckless, sleepless, always running on nerves and noise, and too restless to stay inside. Caleb lived 2 streets over, the kind of kid who made lists for everything, even snacks for a movie night. But even he couldn't resist when I said, let's sneak out. Our meeting spot was the cracked asphalt by the Harbor View docks, skateboards under our arms, the world around us half asleep. We weren't chasing anything specific, just trying to get away from what waited at home. My dad had walked out that spring, leaving behind a quiet that made the walls feel hollow. Caleb's parents had stopped talking altogether. Out there under flickering streetlights and the whine of the sea wind, we felt like kings of a city that didn't care we existed. We pushed off down the streets, our wheels clattering over pavement seams. The sound mixed with my Walkman hissing out a distorted guitar riff and our laughter echoing off empty storefronts. We joked about crushes, about the weird stuff our siblings said. about whether the fireworks at Prescott Park would be worth sneaking into again. But as we rolled toward the piers, something changed. The air thickened. The laughter felt out of place. Up ahead, near the last dock light, I saw them. 5 men in dark fisherman coats. They stood shoulder to shoulder, motionless, shaved heads catching the yellow glow. For a second, I thought maybe they were just fishermen finishing up late. Then one lifted his hand, slow, deliberate, and gestured for us to come closer. "Don't look," Caleb hissed, gripping my sleeve. "Just go, man." But I didn't move. My chest went tight. A voice drifted from the shadows, low and ragged. "Over here." Poison, that broke me. We kicked off, wheels hammering against the pavement, tearing through the night toward the only light we could see, a 24-hour laundromat on Brigg Street. Inside, the air was thick with detergent and humidity. The dryers rumbled and clicked, half-empty drums spinning like lazy hearts. No clerk, no customers, just us and the hum of machines. We ducked behind the counter, gasping, sweat sticking to our shirts. Caleb mouthed, "What the hell was that?" I didn't answer. The bell above the door jingled. They'd followed. The 5 men entered silently, moving like they'd rehearsed it. One dragged his fingers across the glass of a washer, whispering something under his breath. It wasn't English. It sounded like prayer or threat. Then Caleb's pager buzzed, loud. All 5 heads turned in perfect sync. The sound died in my throat. One of them stepped forward. His hand shot out, gripping my arm, and I felt cold steel brush my skin. Then sirens, a wailing crescendo cutting through the night. Red and blue light slashed through the laundromat windows. In an instant, the men scattered, slipping out a side door so fast it was like they melted into the dark. We stayed crouched there until the cops burst in, 2 of them, out of breath, hands on their guns. They asked what happened, but I could barely form words. My palms were scraped raw. My pulse wouldn't slow. Later, the police told us those men were connected to kidnappings across Vermont and New Hampshire, kids gone missing near ports and small towns like ours. I remember sitting on Caleb's porch afterward, the 2 of us wrapped in silence, realizing how close we'd come, how thin the line really was between ordinary life and danger. The days after blurred together. Even in daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed longer, stretching across the pavement like they knew where I was going. Caleb and I avoided the docks, the laundromat, the side streets that once felt like ours. Sleep became impossible. Every sound, a creak, a whisper of wind sent me bolt upright. When I tried to tell my mom, the words came out wrong. "It's nothing," I ended up saying. She just looked tired and nodded. So I kept it to myself. School wasn't safe either. Crowded hallways, buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of pencil shavings, it all felt unreal. My mind kept replaying that night. The reflection of bald heads under sodium light, the sound of boots on tile, the knife against my arm. I'd catch myself flinching at nothing. Caleb would too. One afternoon, walking home from the harbor, Caleb finally spoke what we were both thinking. "You think they'll come back?" His voice cracked like it hurt to ask. "I don't know," I said. "They vanished like ghosts." He nodded, eyes on the ground. "If they do, we won't be alone," I said, but neither of us believed it. The air was too still, the sun too bright to feel safe. That summer dragged on, every errand charged with quiet panic. I couldn't even go to the corner store without scanning reflections in the windows. My mom begged me to stay inside. I couldn't. The walls made it worse. I wanted things to feel normal again, even if normal didn't exist anymore. By mid-July, cops came by our houses more than once, taking statements, fingerprints, photos. They said the kidnappers moved fast, picking kids whose parents were distracted. I remember the way that made my stomach twist, how exposed it made me feel. Caleb and I built a kind of routine after that. We checked the docks before we left home. We only walked at night if we stayed near crowds. We moved in pairs, even to the gas station. But it didn't help much. I still felt eyes on me, even in broad daylight. Once, at the movie theater parking lot, I saw a man standing by the lamppost in a long coat. His bald head gleamed under the sun. I blinked, and he was gone. We tried talking about it at school, but no one believed us. "Sounds like a summer ghost story," someone joked. But it wasn't funny. Caleb and I knew the sound of panic too well. We'd felt that freeze, that instinct to run that came from something primal. By August, waiting for it to happen again was worse than the night itself. We started noticing things. The docks were empty at odd times. The laundromat lights flickered on even when it looked closed. And the cops always showed up just a few minutes too late. Caleb thought we should tell someone. Maybe the harbor master or hell, anyone. Don't, I said. We were on my garage roof that night, legs dangling, boards resting beside us. Crickets chirped somewhere in the dark. We survived because we didn't confront them, I said. If we start digging or talking, if we make noise, they'll notice. And next time we won't get lucky. He didn't argue, but he didn't disagree either. We just sat there in silence, staring out at the harbor lights trembling on the black water, both of us pretending we didn't already know we'd never really escaped. Caleb let out a long breath, his voice low but steady. We can't just ignore it, man. They could have grabbed us that night. What if they try again? What if it's someone else next time? He was right. Ignoring it didn't make it less real, so we started keeping track of everything. Every strange figure near the docks, every cold draft that came from nowhere, every faint whisper that made our skin crawl. We wrote it all down. By the end of August, our notebooks were messy patchworks of paranoia and gut feeling, sketches of faces, fragments of overheard words, times and places circled in pen. When the news broke that more kidnappings had happened in nearby towns, it hit me like a punch. Seeing those headlines in black print, 2 missing in Rye, teen abducted in Hampton, made my stomach twist, but also, it confirmed we hadn't imagined it. We'd been right to be scared. One evening, just before sunset, we were sitting by the pier, boards resting against the rail, when a man approached us. He looked like he'd been living out of his coat for weeks. Graying beard, wrinkled eyes, sleeves frayed at the cuffs. He held a folder tight under his arm like it was something sacred. "You boys saw them, didn't you?" he said quietly. We froze. Caleb blinked. "Saw who?" "The men," he whispered. "The ones taking kids? I've been following their trail for months. You need to stay away from here, understand? Far away, until this is over." He glanced over his shoulder, eyes darting toward the water like he expected to see someone there. Then he set the folder on the ground beside us and walked off without another word. Inside were photos, police clippings, maps marked in red ink. Every point on that map told the same story. Towns just like ours, docks just like these. We traced one line with shaking fingers and realized one of the marks sat barely a mile from our neighborhood. That night we stayed up on my porch flipping through the pages until the first hint of dawn crept over the rooftops. Every page felt like proof of how close we'd come to being another name on a missing poster. Summer bled into fall, and then school began again. The kidnappers, or whatever they were, just disappeared. The cops stopped visiting. The newspaper stopped printing updates. The fear didn't leave overnight, but it started to settle like dust after a storm. Maybe they'd been caught. Maybe they moved on. No one ever said for sure. But Caleb and I were different. We didn't go looking for trouble anymore. We trusted our instincts. If something felt wrong, we left. The docks, once our kingdom, became something else entirely. A place you watched from a distance. The laundromat, too. It stood there quiet. A ghost of that night. A reminder that sometimes surviving has nothing to do with strength and everything to do with luck. After that summer, I started noticing things I used to miss. The way people looked at each other. The weight in someone's tone. How the wind could change right before something bad happened. My world had edges now, sharper ones. Childhood had stretched too thin to fit anymore. Caleb and I stayed friends, but the tone between us shifted. We still hung out, wrote our boards, watched dumb movies. But the laughter didn't come as easily. Every adventure carried a caution we didn't have before. Every turn down a dark street came with a glance over the shoulder. We were older, not in years, but in the way fear had rewritten us. Even now, decades later, I can still smell that summer. The mix of salt and gasoline, the echo of wheels against the dock, the faint hum of danger that never really left. I can still see the flash of red and blue against the laundromat glass, the men's silhouettes dissolving into the dark, the press of Caleb's shoulder against mine when we realized we were still alive. That night taught me something school never could. Bravery isn't charging forward. It's knowing when to freeze, when to run, when to listen to the part of you that screams don't. Curiosity is just courage without caution, and that's what almost got us killed. Whenever I pass a laundromat now, I can't help but slow down. I glance at the windows, half expecting to see a reflection that doesn't belong. Sometimes I swear I hear that sound again. The drag of nails across glass, the whisper that turned the night cold. Fear used to feel like weakness to me. Now I see it for what it is, a warning, a teacher. It's the voice that says, pay attention, because life is fragile and unpredictable, and not everyone who smiles means well. Courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about understanding the weight of fear and choosing to move carefully anyway. And maybe, just maybe, that's what saved us. I was 20 that fall, 2015, still fumbling my way through who I was supposed to be. I wasn't the partying type, never had been. While most people on campus were chasing noise and beer and bad decisions, I spent my nights hunched over my laptop in the glow of my desk lamp, editing photos. Abandoned barns, rusted silos, graveyards no one visited anymore. That was my thing, capturing what everyone else ignored, the forgotten edges of the world. My best friend Noah was everything I wasn't. Loud, magnetic, theatrical to his bones. If I was shadow, he was spotlight. Theater was his life, and somehow he turned every moment into a performance. Ordering coffee, a monologue, walking across the quad, a scene. He didn't just want to live life, he wanted to stage it. He's the one who found the Craigslist post. He slid his phone across the cafeteria table one chilly October afternoon, grinning like a kid about to dare me into trouble. Dude, look at this, he said. The post was short. No photos, just a single line. Genuine demonstrations of impossible illusions. No fee, inquire at the Holloway estate. I frowned. Sounds like some weird LARP thing. Exactly, Noah said, eyes glinting. Which means it'll be hilarious. Worst case, some old guy doing bad card tricks. Best case, we catch something freaky on video and go viral. The internet back then was obsessed with fake haunted house videos, night vision screams, shaky cameras, jump scares that always felt staged. I wasn't into it. But something about that post tugged at me. Maybe it was the word impossible. Maybe I wanted a new shot for my portfolio. You're serious? I asked. You want to drive out to some creepy house because of a Craigslist ad? That's exactly what I want, he said, leaning back smugly. And you're bringing your camera. By Saturday, I'd somehow agreed. We borrowed his sister's beat-up Civic, the one that rattled every time we hit 60. The directions led us out of Charleston, past sagging Halloween decorations and quiet cul-de-sacs, then into the kind of countryside where radio stations faded to static. Bare trees lined the road like ribs. Then we saw it, the Holloway estate. It looked like something I'd have photographed, a decaying Victorian crouched behind an iron gate, its siding peeled raw by time. Some of the windows were boarded up, others open like blind eyes. A rusted crest was welded into the gate's bars, half worn away. This is perfect, Noah whispered, almost reverent. To him, it was theater set dressing. To me, it felt like trespassing on a grave. The gate wasn't even locked. It moaned when we pushed it open, gravel crunching beneath our sneakers as we walked the weed-choked path. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, part fear, part thrill. The front door creaked open before we even knocked. The smell hit first. Mildew, damp wood and something sharp underneath, like pennies soaked in water. A tall man stood in the shadows of the hall. He was impossibly thin, dressed in a navy tailcoat that might have been elegant 50 years ago. His voice was low and measured, each word shaped like it mattered. "Welcome to the Holloway estate," he said. "I am Professor Vale." I looked at Noah, his grin widened. "Hell yes," he whispered. "This is going to be amazing." I wanted to believe him, but as Vale stepped aside, motioning for us to enter, something cold and heavy settled in my gut. Whatever this was, it wasn't a harmless act. He led us down a narrow hall into what must have been the parlor. The air was thick, the wallpaper sagging off the walls. The chandelier above us hung unevenly, dust catching the faint light. But in the center of the room, a single table stood, perfectly arranged, too deliberate. On it lay a deck of hand-painted cards, not paper, wood thin and warped, symbols carved and filled with black and crimson pigment, the strokes rough like gouges. None looked familiar. "Each of you must choose," Vale said softly, hands clasped behind his back. Noah didn't hesitate. He grabbed one with a jagged crown painted on it, the points like thorns. Vale's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. He reached beneath the table and brought out a rusted meat hook. Before we could react, he slammed it into the wood, crack inches from Noah's hand. Noah flinched back, swearing. "Jesus, man." Vale's voice dropped. "That," he whispered, "is the trick." We stood frozen. For a second, I thought maybe that was it. The big scare, some weird theater stunt. Noah let out a nervous laugh, rubbing his wrist. "Okay," he said, creepy, but good showmanship. "You got me." Vale turned to me. "And you?" Every instinct told me to walk out, but Noah's eyes were on me, waiting, daring. And maybe I wanted to prove something, to him, to myself. I reached out and picked a card. It showed a hollow eye, dark and empty. Vale's grin widened. Without a word, he disappeared into the next room. Noah leaned close. "Okay, this dude's committed," he whispered. I could hear the excitement in his voice, but it didn't match the tightness in my chest. When Vale came back, he carried a gas lantern. The flame inside wasn't upright. It leaned like something invisible was pulling it sideways. Noah's laugh broke off mid-breath. "Okay, what the hell?" "How did you—" I shook my head. There were no wires, no wind. Just that wrong, impossible flame hissing softly inside the glass. Then I realized the door behind us was shut. I turned, tried the knob. It didn't budge. My pulse stuttered. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. His eyes just glinted in the lantern's flickering light as he set it on the table. The flame still leaned sideways, straining against nothing. Noah's voice broke the silence. "I think we should leave." We both turned for the door. It didn't open. Panic flickered through me as we scrambled through the house. First the kitchen, then the hall. The back door was nailed shut, boards crossed like a warning. The windows were sealed with heavy curtains stapled into the frames. Even the side hallway had furniture piled against it, blocking the way. "This is insane," I whispered, pulling at a nailed window frame until my palms stung. Noah tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "Okay, so this is what, immersive theater? That's gotta be what this is, right?" He didn't sound like he believed it. When we stumbled back into the parlor, Vale was waiting. He held a cracked smartphone in one pale hand, the screen glowing cold against his skin. Without a word, he tapped play. The video was shaky, filmed in a dim basement. A man sat tied to a chair, shirtless, his eyes wild and pleading. And then, Vale stepped into the frame. His calm, deliberate voice narrated as he pressed nails through the man's palms one by one, like he was teaching a class. I gagged and turned away, bile burning the back of my throat. Noah's face went rigid. The cocky energy drained out of him completely. "You're sick," he hissed. Vale tilted his head, his tone almost patient. "The audience demands authenticity." That's when Noah snapped. He grabbed my camera bag, yanked out my DSLR, and swung it like a weapon. The body of the camera cracked against Vale's temple with a dull thud. Blood trickled down his face, but the expression he wore, it wasn't pain. It was delight. He smiled wider and lifted the meat hook. "Run!" I shouted. We tore through the halls, yanking at every door, slamming into blocked exits. The house was a maze of dead ends, like it had been designed to hold its prey. My lungs burned. The air reeked of dust and metal. Vale's boots dragged across the floorboards behind us, the hook scraping, echoing. And then, sirens. The faint rise and fall of them outside growing louder. Red and blue light flashed through the cracks in the boarded windows. Vale froze mid-step. His face twisted into something feral, not human. He hissed, low and guttural, words that didn't sound like any language I knew, and then he was gone. Slipped back into the dark behind the stairwell, as if the shadows swallowed him whole. The front door burst open a moment later. Flashlights cut through the gloom. "Hands up! Move!" Someone shouted. A police officer grabbed me, half dragging me out onto the gravel drive. Cold air hit my face and I collapsed onto my knees. My legs felt like water. Noah stumbled beside me, gasping. They found the basement later. Chains bolted to the walls. Blood on the planks. Signs of a struggle. But Vale was gone, vanished like smoke. At the station, I gave my statement. So did Noah. He tried to joke to keep his hands from shaking, but his laugh sounded wrong, like something cracked. Weeks later, A detective called my dorm. Professor Vale, if that was even his name, was wanted in connection with at least 4 disappearances across West Virginia. The Holloway estate was condemned, the grounds fenced off, but Vale himself was still missing. Nothing felt normal after that. Every time I lifted my camera, I half expected to see his reflection in the lens, standing behind me, smiling that same blood-slick smile. Noah quit theater. He told everyone he was just refocusing, but I knew. He couldn't pretend anymore. After you've looked a real monster in the eye, the stage feels small. My photos changed too. I stopped chasing decay for beauty's sake. Every abandoned place felt dangerous now, like it remembered the people who'd gone missing. Sometimes when my dorm was quiet, I could swear I heard it. The faint scrape of metal on wood, like that hook dragging across the table. We made it out, but not clean, not whole. Curiosity can open doors better left closed. Not every invitation is a performance, and not every performer stops when the curtain falls. Sometimes the only difference between surviving and vanishing is the moment you finally listen to your gut and walk away. When I think back to that November, it's not the snow I remember first, or the lodge, or even the storm. It's the silence. Not the kind you find in a library or during an exam, but a deeper, weightier kind, like the mountains themselves had swallowed every sound and were holding it hostage. That fall, I'd been restless in a way I couldn't name. My photography was flat, work deadlines blurred together, and my apartment in Calgary felt more like a storage unit than a home. I'd started to feel like I was suffocating in my own routines. So when Rowan suggested a getaway, a real one, he'd said, I didn't hesitate. He'd found an old hunting lodge tucked deep in the Rockies, over 100 years old but still standing. Completely off-grid, he said, eyes gleaming. The photos looked straight out of a faded postcard, all rough-hewn beams and stone chimneys swallowed by pine. The thought of snow-dusted peaks and empty landscapes was enough to make me breathe again. Theo agreed instantly, claiming he'd cook mountain feasts out of whatever we could cram into the SUV. Sienna took longer. She chewed at her lip like she always did when she was anxious. I don't know, she murmured, eyes darting between us. Places like that, they get in your head. But loyalty was her default, and she finally sighed. Fine, just don't blame me if we get snowed in. The drive started lighthearted. Music blared, windows fogged with laughter, and Theo kept trying to harmonize badly with whatever song was playing. But the farther we climbed into the mountains, the quieter things got. The highway narrowed into serpentine roads hemmed by drifts of white. Pines rose in jagged ranks on either side, black and skeletal against the bruised sky. By the time the lodge came into view, a hulking silhouette crouched above the tree line. The sun was gone. It was bigger than I'd imagined. A brooding mix of timber and stone with a roof that sagged in the middle like an old man's spine. The windows were unlit, glass dull and empty. Rowan was practically vibrating, rambling about preserved craftsmanship and pre-war architecture. I just stepped out into the freezing air and raised my camera, catching the lodge against a blood-orange horizon. Inside, it smelled of wood smoke, dust, and time. The furniture was heavy, the kind that creaked when you brushed past it. Quilts faded to near gray hung over chairs, and our footsteps echoed in the wide hall. We each picked a room upstairs. Mine had wallpaper peeling in one corner and a window that rattled when the wind blew. Theo managed to coax a fire to life, the flames casting restless shadows across the beams. We cooked pasta that was too salty but warm, played cards at the long wooden table, and tried to ignore the storm clawing at the windows. It should have felt cozy, safe, but as I leaned toward the glass, watching snow whip itself into spirals, I froze. There, between 2 pines, a figure stood, still upright, half swallowed by the dark. My breath hitched. Someone's out there, I whispered. Rowan snorted, tossing a card down. You've been staring through that camera too long. You're seeing ghosts in your own lens. Theo chuckled. Sienna forced a laugh, and I tried to smile, but my stomach was already twisting. That silhouette, it hadn't moved. Not once, too still to be human. Too solid to be imagination. That was our first night. The first time the silence seemed to press too close, like the air itself was listening. The first time I thought maybe this trip had been a mistake. By morning, the world outside was nothing but white. The storm had buried the trees halfway up their trunks, and even the air seemed frozen. We gathered in the kitchen, cradling mugs of instant coffee that smelled faintly like cardboard. Theo cursed when the generator sputtered out, leaving us in the flicker of the dying fire. "It's fine," he said, forcing cheer. "We've got food, firewood, and good company. Worst case, we play Monopoly till spring," but the tension started creeping in anyway. Rowan insisted on proper firewood stacking techniques. Theo rolled his eyes. Sienna stayed near me, chewing her lip until it bled. "Something's wrong," she whispered. I didn't sleep. I heard footsteps outside, just pacing. Her voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to reassure her, but the dark smudges under her eyes told me she wasn't inventing it. That night, the wind sounded different, lower, almost like it carried voices in its throat. We tried to laugh it off, playing cards again, but my gaze kept drifting to the windows. The glass seemed to breathe with the wind, flexing, whispering. Sometime after midnight, I jolted awake. The storm had stopped. No wind, no creaks, no sound at all. The silence was wrong, thick and unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. I reached over. Sienna's bed was empty. A bolt of panic went through me. I threw on my jacket, grabbed my flashlight, and crept downstairs. The lodge was a maze of black shapes and half-burned embers, the smell of smoke and cold wood filling my nose. The floorboards complained softly under my weight. "Sienna?" My voice barely broke the air. No answer. I swung the beam across the room, trembling slightly. The walls, the chairs, the cold glow of ash in the fireplace. Everything looked too still. My breath fogged and vanished before my eyes. I called her name again, quieter this time. The silence swallowed it whole. I yanked open the front door. Snow gusted in, stinging my face and throat with cold. Through the blur of white, a figure stumbled out of the trees, arms limp, steps uncertain. My heart slammed as I recognized her. Sienna! She collapsed against me, her body shockingly cold, her hair stiff with frost. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "There's someone watching us. Standing out there, just watching." Her voice was hoarse, raw, like it had scraped its way out of her throat. I dragged her inside, shutting the door against the wind. She shook violently, refusing the blanket I threw over her shoulders. Rowan crouched beside us, trying for calm, though his voice wavered. "You're freezing, Sienna. No one's out there. It's just the storm messing with you." But his eyes didn't match his words. He looked toward the window more than once. That was the second night. The night fear started to chew through us like rot. By dawn, the firewood was running low and the generator had sputtered out sometime before sunrise. Theo volunteered to check it, tugging on his boots. "I'll be quick," he said with forced cheer. "If I'm not back in 10, assume I froze and make me a statue." He smiled, but his shoulders were tight, his humor brittle. An hour passed. Then 2. Rowan's patience cracked. "I'll get him," he muttered, yanking on his coat. Probably tinkering like an idiot again. But neither of them came back. The lodge grew cavernous with just Sienna and me inside. The wind pressed against the walls, whispering like someone circling the building. Sienna sat by the fire, wringing her hands until her knuckles turned white. "They're messing with us," she hissed. "Or maybe it's him, the man I saw? Don't you see? He's hunting us." Her words crawled under my skin, coiling tight. Every groan of wood made me flinch. Every flicker of shadow looked like movement. When night fell again, we barricaded ourselves in the kitchen, knives clenched tight. The air between us was heavy, charged with something uglier than fear. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't trust me either. "You think it's me, don't you?" she asked, voice trembling. I gripped the knife harder. "Tell me the truth, Sienna." Her face twisted, her voice breaking into a scream. "I didn't touch them." The sound ripped through the silence like a tear in the world. We circled each other, wild-eyed, breathing hard, blades raised. The fire threw our shadows huge across the walls. I don't remember deciding. Just the movement, the lunge, the sudden warmth on my hands, and Sienna's gasp cutting through the air. She fell against me, the knife still buried deep. Blood spread quickly, dark against the floorboards. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and glassy. "You weren't supposed to remember," she whispered. My stomach twisted. "What?" But she was already gone. Then the memories flooded in, shards of truth slicing through my skull. The drive up alone in the SUV. The lodge echoing as I'd hauled in my gear. The laughter by the fire. Just my own voice bouncing back from the walls. Rowan's careful optimism. Theo's jokes, Sienna's shaking hands, they were fragments. Fractures of me, splintered into people so I wouldn't have to feel alone. I stumbled from room to room, calling their names into the emptiness. Only silence answered. Their beds were still made. Their clothes never unpacked. The knife slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor, streaked with my own blood. It was me. It had always been me. Days blurred together. Snow sealed the lodge from the world outside. I stopped checking the windows. I sat by the fireplace instead, staring into the flames until they blurred. Sometimes I swore I heard Theo humming in the next room, or Rowan's footsteps pacing upstairs. Sometimes I caught a flash of Sienna's hair at the edge of my vision. But when I turned, there was nothing. Only cold and dust. When the storm finally broke, the silence thickened again, heavier than before. Weeks later, rescuers found me slumped in the kitchen, half-starved, murmuring to voices that weren't there. They said I'd rented the lodge alone. No record of my friends. No footprints but mine in the snow. Maybe they're right. Maybe the storm took them, or maybe they never existed at all. What I know is this: when the night grows still enough, I still hear them. Their laughter, their footsteps, their whispers threading through the dark. Isolation doesn't always come from the world outside. Sometimes it's born inside us in the cracks we refuse to see. And the real horror isn't the storm or the shadows beyond the glass. It's the darkness that waits quietly within, patient, until it convinces us that we were never alone. I still remember the smell of salt that September evening in 2019. It clung to my jacket like something alive, as if the Atlantic itself had reached into Seabrook, Maine, a sleepy coastal town where nothing much ever happened and where the nights seemed to hum with the sound of the sea. I was 13, nervous about starting a new school but trying to seem excited, especially when Harper Lane invited me over for a sleepover at her family's house. It sat high on the cliffs, gray shingles curling like old bark. The driveway cracked and half swallowed by weeds. The air was damp, sharp with seaweed and salt. When I stepped out of the car, I could hear gulls somewhere in the distance and the dull roar of the tide. Rowan came with me, of course. She'd been my best friend since third grade. Organized, cautious, always over-prepared. She carried a duffel that looked like it could sustain her through a blizzard. My mom watched us climb the porch steps, the boards whining under our sneakers. "Stick together, Callie," she said. "Check in, trust your instincts, and remember, Harper's family is nice, but don't wander off." I smiled, doing my best not to roll my eyes. "Got it, Mom." Inside, the house smelled of old wood and cardboard, like the attic of a forgotten summer home. Half-unpacked boxes lined the walls, casting tall, crooked shadows. Harper bounded through them with restless energy, laughing, snapping pictures with her instant camera. "Sorry about the mess," she said, grinning. "We're still unpacking. Mom says the house is full of character. Translation, it's haunted." Rowan laughed nervously. "Please don't say that before bed." We spent the evening eating greasy pizza from the diner, blasting pop songs and playing Truth or Dare in the cluttered living room. Harper's laughter filled the space like light. Rowan and I exchanged quiet glances now and then. Little reminders to stay cautious, but there wasn't much to be afraid of. Not yet. Around 11, Harper bounced to her feet. "Let's go for a walk. The cliff trail looks amazing at night." Rowan frowned. "Now it's dark. My mom won't care," Harper said. "She lets me go down there all the time. Come on, it's just a few minutes." Outside, the night hit cold and clean. The air smelled sharp, metallic almost, the kind of cold that bit the inside of your nose. The wind carried the crash of waves, steady and distant. Our flashlights sliced through the darkness, catching the sway of pine branches and glints of wet rock. Rowan walked close beside me, her breath quick, the beam in her hand shaking slightly. "This is kind of creepy," she muttered. "It's fine," Harper said, half smiling. "You'll love the view." At first I did. The forest opened to glimpses of the ocean far below, black and endless. Harper darted ahead, crouching to take pictures of moss-covered stones, her flash popping like lightning. But after a while, something in the air changed. The sound of the sea grew distant, muffled. I couldn't tell why, but the hairs on my arms lifted. That's when I saw him. A shape up ahead on the path, tall, still, hooded. My stomach twisted. I leaned toward Rowan, whispering, "He's following us." She froze, light trembling in her grip. "What, who?" The figure moved again, just enough for the beam to catch the glint of something metallic, a knife or something like it. And then the smell hit, rot wet and sour, thick enough to make me gag. "Run," Rowan breathed. We bolted. Branches tore at our sleeves as we stumbled through the dark, Harper shouting somewhere behind us. The crunch of our shoes on gravel mixed with the distant roar of waves. By the time we reached the porch, my lungs burned. We slammed the door shut, twisting the lock until it clicked. No one wanted to wake Harper's parents. We didn't even speak for a moment, just stood there listening to the wind rattle the windows. My hands shook. Every sound in the house, every pop of wood, every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps approaching. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Maybe just someone hiking late, maybe. But the smell clung to me, thick and sour, and deep down I knew better. Back in the living room, the half-eaten pizza had gone cold. Rowan's hands trembled as she fiddled with her flashlight. Harper was pale, biting her thumbnail. "You guys sure it wasn't a trick of the light?" she whispered. I tried to sound calm. Maybe, I don't know. But he was holding something. No one slept. By 2 a.m., Harper shoved a DVD into the player, desperate to fill the silence. The horror movie flickered across the room, shadows dancing on the walls. The house creaked like it was breathing. I sat near the window, the glass cold against my arm, staring out toward the cliffs. The trees swayed in the moonlight, and every now and then I swore I saw movement between them. Rowan refused to look that way. "The shadows are wrong," she whispered. "They're moving the wrong way." I didn't argue. I just kept watching, waiting for another glint of metal in the dark. An hour later, my flashlight cut through the dark and caught something moving outside. For a second I thought it was a trick of the wind, but then I saw him. A shirtless, pale man slipping between the pines, gone almost as soon as my light touched him. "Did you see that?" Harper whispered, her voice brittle and small. Her laugh faltered halfway out of her throat and died. None of us moved. The air felt suddenly heavier, pressing down on us. I could hear Rowan breathing fast beside me, the house creaking like it was holding its own breath. My mind scrambled for logic, maybe a lost hiker, maybe a dream, but the chill crawling up my arm said otherwise. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees, as though something outside had dragged the cold in with it. At 4:30 a.m., a single knock echoed through the house, sharp, hollow. My stomach twisted. Harper jolted upright, her eyes wide in the dim glow of the TV. "Don't," Rowan hissed when I stood. But I couldn't help it. I crept toward the front door, each floorboard groaning underfoot. My heart hammered as I pressed my eye to the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness. Then the smell hit, thick and foul, the same rot we'd smelled in the woods. It seeped through the cracks, sour and metallic, clinging to my throat. Somewhere deeper in the house, footsteps creaked, slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway. Harper's dad appeared seconds later, his face pale and tight, a shotgun gripped in both hands. "Stay here," he muttered, sweeping the beam of his flashlight across the living room. But when he reached the front windows, there was nothing. No figure, no sound, just the whisper of the wind through the chimney. We sat huddled together until dawn, barely breathing, the silence pressing in from all sides. When the police arrived later that morning, their cruisers flashing red and blue against the cliffside mist, they searched every inch of the property, the woods, the shoreline, even the narrow paths between the pines. Nothing. One officer, a tired-looking man with gray stubble, gave us a sympathetic smile. "Probably some prankster," he said. "Happens near the coast sometimes." I nodded, but inside I knew better. The fear still throbbed in my chest, raw and alive. Rowan gripped my arm so tightly I could feel her nails through my sleeve. "I'm never going back down there," she whispered. "Me neither," I said. And I meant it. A week later, the news broke. A maintenance worker had found an old shed half a mile from Harper's property. Inside were 5 bodies, decaying, sunken, long forgotten. Police tape fluttered in the sea wind like a warning. When I saw the report on TV, the torn jackets, the knife they'd recovered, I felt my stomach turn to ice. The smell. The figure. We hadn't imagined any of it. We'd just been lucky. That night, we sat together in Harper's living room again. No music, no laughter. The air between us was thick and quiet, heavy with something none of us could name. Outside, the pines swayed in the wind, and I could swear I heard whispers carried in from the cliffs. After that, sleepovers were canceled for good. For weeks, I barely slept. Every time the house creaked, I jolted awake. Every gust of wind against the window made my pulse spike. Rowan stayed with her aunt for a while, saying she needed somewhere quieter. Even Harper changed. Her spark dimmed, her voice smaller. My mom's words replayed in my mind over and over. Trust your instincts. Back then, it had sounded like something parents said to make you feel careful. But now it echoed like a truth I'd been too naive to understand. Safety, I realized, wasn't something you could take for granted. It could vanish in the span of a heartbeat, replaced by a cold wind and the echo of footsteps in the dark. We tried to move on, talking about school, gossip, normal things, but conversations always circled back to that night. The what-ifs, the almosts. We learned to check the trails during the day, to never walk alone, to trust the gut feeling that twisted in your stomach when something felt wrong. Even when no one else believed you, especially then. Years have passed, but sometimes when I visit Seabrook, I still catch that same smell of salt and rot on the wind. It brings the memory back so vividly that I can almost see the cliffs, the pines, and that pale figure slipping between them. That night taught me something that's never left me. Danger doesn't always roar. Sometimes it watches, sometimes it waits. Childhood ended for me on that cliff. What replaced it wasn't fear exactly, it was awareness. The kind that sharpens you, the kind that makes you listen to the quiet, because safety is never promised and innocence isn't armor. Trusting your instincts doesn't make you paranoid. It keeps you alive. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's knowing what's out there and walking carefully anyway.